We had planned to have the Assistant Attorney General Lori Robinson here, who has been appointed as the new director of the Office of Justice Programs. And Lori was an obvious choice for us to address this conference. She had been the acting Assistant Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General for the Office of Justice Programs since January, and then just recently had confirmation and is now the director. Okay, is that better? Okay. She brings a great wealth of experience, and she's been a great supporter for evidence-based programming. She's overseeing right now the implementation of $2.7 billion in programs which Congress assigned responsibility to OJP for, and she has in that capacity has launched a new agency-wide evidence integration initiative to help ensure that we're using evidence-based approaches in the OJP-funded programs. And it's because of that interest that she's had. We went with Lori several years ago to visit the Incredible Years program in Denver. And at that point, we had a chance to talk to her about model programs, blueprint model programs, and evidence-based programs. And she's been a steady supporter for this kind of an effort at the federal level for the whole time that she's been there, both as the assistant and I believe now as she's the director. Unfortunately, Lori has taken ill, and so she's unable to be here, and I know that's a disappointment to many of you. However, we are very, very fortunate. We have an excellent replacement for Lori. So I would like to introduce Phelan Wyrick, who's the senior advisor to the Assistant Attorney General and Director of OJP. And Phelan brings a lot of experience as well. For the last decade, he's been in senior advisory positions in the Office of Justice Programs, including NIJ and OJJDP. He's overseen federal research and evaluation demonstration programs on gangs and on basic prevention programs. He received the 2007 Attorney General Award for outstanding contributions to community partnerships for work on anti-gang interventions. Last year, he led the development effort for the evidence integration in justice programs in OJP. Prior to that, he was a research associate in the City of Westminster, City of Westminster Police Department in Orange County. He has a doctorate in social psychology from Claremont Graduate School, and that makes it special for me because I hold my early degrees are from Pomona College, so we actually share a common history. I think we're both sage hens. That was our mascot at that point. But it gives me great pleasure to introduce Phelan Wyrick. I don't know if Claremont conversation.
No. I am not a sage hen, by the way. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Elliott. I know Lori Robinson regrets not being able to be here today because really in this room there are so many old friends and colleagues for her here. And she spoke to me about her earlier days at Office of Justice Programs under Janet Reno. And when she worked closely with the Center for the Study of Prevention of Violence. And she and I both feel a strong personal connection to the theme here. And That includes both out of our past experiences and past perspectives and also what you're trying to achieve going forward. As she and I worked to develop and prepare this presentation, we reflected on an event that happened not long ago. In fact, about 3 weeks ago on St. Patrick's Day, in fact. We in the department had brought together about 25 experts from across the nation to speak on the issue of children exposure to violence. And some of you may know that this is a very high personal priority for the Attorney General. And so Attorney General Holder was there speaking with these experts. And it was a fairly diverse group. We had a mix of researchers and practitioners, much as we do here. And we had a very productive discussion on the issues, and an interesting thing happened. We found that the conversation and discussion very quickly moved to this question of evidence-based practices and the role of research and evaluation and the importance of that work. And one of the participants, and she was a service provider who works with kids, but she was also a survivor of violence. And after listening to a lot of the others talk, she raised her hand to speak and she said, I draw my evidence from the community and from the people. I draw my evidence from the ground up. And when I hear about research evidence, and I think that's something for the university professors, something for outsiders who don't really understand my community or the work that we're doing on the ground level. And it struck me when I heard this that she's certainly not the only one who feels this way. There are thousands of people out there like her, human service providers, law enforcement officers, judges, prosecutors, who feel lost in this push for evidence-based programming. And so it was very instructive to me and also to Lori, who are, like you, people who want to see this research given its proper place in the way that we do business. The message we took away from her comments is that as we're moving forward on this path to evidence-based programming, we really need to pause and take stock of how this is all being received. We've already heard a little bit about how the term evidence-based has become watered down. It doesn't have a clear meaning. People are using it in many different ways. But we're all adherents here to this basic idea, and it's easy for us to assume that everyone accepts this need for scientifically valid standards of evidence. But clearly that's not the case. And I think one of our biggest challenges is going to be how we address those other ways of thinking. Making sure that as we go forward, we're picking up passengers along the way and not losing them. So Todd Clear put it this way when he spoke at the American Society of Criminology in November. He said that there's a flip side to what he called the superb potential of evidence-based practices. And that is the troubling implications of evangelical adherence to it. So there's a messaging issue here, but there's also a credibility issue here. It's clear that many practitioners continue to have difficulty understanding and properly using research evidence. That's the messaging side. But it's also clear that there's a lot of practitioners and policymakers who feel it's the researchers that really don't understand their needs and their work on the ground. That's the credibility side. So this is an exciting time to be involved in justice research, and I'll talk more about the levels of support that we have, certainly out of Washington and across the field. But we also need to keep this in perspective. After all, let's face it, those of us who come to this conference are already among the converted. We can't forget that we still have a lot of groundwork to do before people are really ready to listen to the valuable lessons that we're uncovering. Until we do a better job of making the case about why our work is important, we're going to miss some important opportunities. And so, on behalf of Lori Robinson and the Office of Justice Programs, I'd like to challenge all of us, and this is part of our challenge at OJP as well, to figure out how we can do a better job of getting what we know out to the field in a way that will first be accepted, but then second, be used. Now, as they said in the introduction, I'm a social scientist, and I've worked in the police department and 12 years at Department of Justice. So I've spent my career at this sort of crossroads between practice and policy on the one hand and research on the other. And I know that the two don't always easily coexist. but I believe they can and should be mutually supportive. And I'm also mindful of what in Washington, we also have to be sort of mindful of what James Q. Wilson said almost 30 years ago. And he talked about the duty of the statesman. And this is the position that a lot of policymakers and decision makers are in our field. And he said it's the duty of the statesman to link the confident instincts, immediate knowledge, and deeply held values of the citizen with the policy analysis of the specialist, so as to produce by informed persuasion reasonable programs. Now, that word reasonable, it could sound like a concession to expediency to some in this room. It might sound like a willingness to compromise principle in order to win a favorable public opinion. But it was Abraham Lincoln himself who said that with public sentiment, nothing can fail, and without it, nothing can succeed. So at the Office of Justice Programs, we need to be mindful of the sentiment of our public, which is the state and local practitioners and policymakers, local mayors, county officials, for example. And we have to try to put ourselves in their shoes. One of the first things we need to do, I'd suggest, is we need to work on expanding our common vocabulary. Okay, this means speaking in terms that everyone can understand, but also means speaking in ways that everyone can relate to. We need to remember that stories are powerful modes of conveying information. They're used all the time. And this can seem, for many of us who are social scientists or who are committed to evidence-based approaches, this can seem a little bit like a betrayal of what we're trying to achieve, right? After all, our goal is to get away from policy making by anecdote. But we don't want to, and we certainly don't want to dip into, the smack of sensationalism on this. That's exactly what we're fighting against. But narratives don't have to be the enemy of data. And we've seen this be powerful in Washington for all kinds of causes. So narratives and evidence can work together. And I think the more we see them as mutually supportive, the better we'll be able to make our case. I also think we need to reconsider our idea of what counts as quality evidence. And I'm an enormous fan of randomized, controlled, and experimental research designs. But we need to keep our perspective on issues that might come into limiting ourselves if we're effectively looking at nothing else. Because again, the way that people talk about this, the way that non-specialists talk about evidence-based programming is in shorthand. So many just fall to, well, okay, the golden standard is an RCT or a randomized controlled trial, so that's the only evidence they seem to consider or care about. But if we only allow ourselves a single approach, then we can only ask those questions that can be used in a single method. This gets right back to what Shea Bilczek referred to earlier today as the box that he was put in by Congressman Tancredo. From our perspective at OJP, we simply can't be in the position of telling a mayor or a county commissioner, sorry, we don't have any gold standards evaluated programs on the issue or the problem that you're facing. You're sort of out of luck. Okay? So we have to recognize that there's multiple forms of evidence. So part of our job and part of our challenge is to help practitioners distinguish between high-quality evidence and low-quality evidence. We have to help these folks become educated consumers when it comes to evidence. We have to help them learn. And researchers, policymakers, and practitioners must all recognize that we generally don't have the luxury of waiting for every program and practice to be rigorously tested. So how can we look at evidence as it exists and move up the level of rigor? So much of the responsibility for this falls back to the Office of Justice Programs where I work. And at OJP, one of our most important obligations is to make sure the criminal and juvenile justice fields have the best information available to do their jobs effectively. This means that supporting research is a vital part of our mission, of course. And hand in hand with supporting research is the responsibility for translating it into use. In other words, integrating evidence into the day-to-day work of public safety professionals, juvenile justice, and criminal justice. Over the last year, we've been working on what we call our Evidence Integration Initiative. And when Lori Robinson came on board about a year ago, I was very fortunate that she came to me and asked me to work to lead this process. There's a lot of work already going on. This conference is evidence of it, to assemble evidence and convey that to folks. But one of the things we wanted to try to accomplish out of the Evidence Integration Initiative was also to come back to our own workforce at OJP. And how do we educate the people across our entire organization? Not just in juvenile justice, or not just in violence prevention, or not just our research people, and not just a project that's done by one or two folks over in this corner of the organization. But how do we reach across the full range of issues that we address at Office of Justice Programs and help them better use and integrate evidence? We built the initiative around three primary goals. We're looking to improve the quantity, and the quality of the evidence that we generate through research, evaluation, and statistical functions. We're looking to better integrate the evidence in program and policy decisions within OJP and in the field. And third, we're trying to better translate evidence into practice. Now, under each of these goals, we have a number of objectives and activities that we're launching. It's an OJP-wide effort. And we're really looking to look at how we can better use accepted scientific principles across the topics that we address. Some topic areas are much further along than others. While there's still a lot of work to be done here in violence prevention and the juvenile justice field, some of our fields that we deal with in criminal justice and victims issues are even at a much more, in a much less developed state. So I'll talk to you about a couple of the items we're doing under the Evidence Integration Initiative. One, we're working to establish common expectations and definitions for credible evidence across OJP programs. And as I've said, we can't be beholden to a single method, but we must inform the general discussion of evidence and reflect an understanding for the value of rigorous research and evaluation. Now, one of the distinctions we're drawing here for our practical purposes is a distinction between what we call descriptive evidence and causal evidence. Most people who think about evidence-based programs move very quickly to thinking about the evidence derived from program evaluations to answer the question, does it work? And we call that causal evidence for our purposes, and it's critical, of course, to understanding critical to our efforts to support effective interventions. But we also need to recognize and articulate the strong value of descriptive evidence. And descriptive evidence comes from a wide range of research approaches, statistical, qualitative, and other research approaches. And this kind of evidence is essential in informing our strategy development, targeting services, preventing implementation failure. And we need to be educating all of our practitioners and consumers of this information on how to use that descriptive evidence as well. Now, I want to be very clear that we're also in the process of expanding and enhancing our support for randomized field experiments. We understand and recognize that this type of research has a unique and long-lasting effect on the field. And we're committed to using and supporting more of them where it's feasible and appropriate to do so. But one of the ways that folks in the real world come to these questions of evidence, many practitioners and policymakers don't say, well, I want to find an evidence-based program. What they say is, and the way they come to us is, I've got a problem. I need to respond to an issue in my community. And there's a wide range of evidence that might be available on that. So we're taking another approach that's problem-focused towards integrating evidence. We're establishing evidence integration teams in the Office of Justice Programs to synthesize evidence on specific justice topics and develop principles for practice that can be communicated to the field. And we're starting with a small number of these, and we'll increase the number as we move forward. But the idea is to outline what the status of evidence is in specific topic areas, and then try to provide principles to help folks better carry out their interventions, but also provide guidance for how we can move forward in building the evidence base in those areas. So we must focus also on how to get the information and get the best evidence out to the field in a format that's accessible and useful to practitioners. So, as you might expect, we're, like so many others, we're working towards putting together a website that's going to allow us to present this information, sort of a what works and what's promising clearinghouse. And again, we recognize that there's a number of examples of this type of website out there. Two differences. One is the scope of topics that we're going to address. That includes criminal justice and also victims issues. And another is just the fact that we are coming at it from the federal government and presenting this from the Office of Justice Programs. So we hope also to create a diagnostic center that will allow us to provide direct support to jurisdictions as they apply these approaches and provide training and information and make that information readily accessible to folks in the field. And this is a few things about what we're working towards in the Evidence Integration Initiative. But I'm happy to report that behind all of this is the fact that the President's budget request for next year supports this initiative. We've done a lot of behind-the-scenes work. This has been sort of a quiet initiative in terms of our public face. But we've done a lot of behind-the-scenes work to build the support throughout the administration, and it really comes from the White House on down. In the President's budget, there's $7 million listed for the online clearinghouse and the diagnostic center. And another very important element of the budget is that it includes a 3% set-aside of all the grant and reimbursement programs coming through Office of Justice Programs. This 3% set-aside is to be used for research, evaluation, and statistical purposes. This is unprecedented, and it comes on top of the existing budgets and the base budgets for the National Institute of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Statistics. So you can see that the President, the Attorney General, and this Assistant Attorney General, Lori Robinson, are very serious about the commitment of restoring science to its rightful place in criminal and juvenile justice. Attorney General Eric Holder has spoken on a number of occasions about the importance of being smart on crime, about adopting evidence-based approaches and principles. And I don't think we could have a better advocate in his position for evidence-based programming. In fact, Lori Robinson and the Attorney General have met with a number of prominent researchers over the recent months to talk about how research and policy can work together. And I've been fortunate enough to be present and to meet and work with the Attorney General in some of these meetings. And I can tell you, he gets it. He gets it at a very sophisticated level. And I think that that's a real credit to this administration and his leadership in the department for what we're going to see coming forward. The Assistant Attorney General, of course, is interested in continuing to strengthen OJP's partnership with researchers and the research community. And over the course of the last year, we've begun a series that has brought in a number of prominent researchers, including David Olds, as part of a National Institute of Justice lecture series. This lecture series is largely for the purpose of better informing the OJP workforce and the Department of Justice workforce. Because as we better understand these issues, we're able to better support it going forward. So people throughout the department and throughout the administration, including OMB, where budget decisions are made, are talking about science. And they're talking a genuine and deep interest in what the research is showing. And this is all very encouraging for someone like me who has this deep personal commitment as well. So we do know much more than ever from research, but we still need to do more work to bridge that gap between the researchers and the practitioners. We've seen a great deal of progress, but we know more needs to happen. And we need to think in terms of selling the value of research to practitioners, helping them to understand that it can make a difference in how effective they are. We talked in one of the earlier sessions about the challenges. Often it requires a larger upfront investment to see downstream benefits in the prevention world. We need to show this to the practitioners. We need to find ways to better communicate that message and shore up our own credibility with them. So this is an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be involved in criminal and juvenile justice. We have support at the highest levels of government, and we started to get the attention of practitioners and the general public across the board. So let's take advantage of this opportunity and make sure that we take the steps that are needed to get that good work into circulation. In closing, I just want to thank all of you for your important work and contributions here. As much has been accomplished to date, we're still very much at the beginning of this effort. And I heard about the panel this morning, and I thought about those pioneers who were really on the frontier of this work and have been working in this work for 20, 30 years and more. And I started wondering, well, who's the next generation? Because this is really just beginning. And so that work will all be prologue for what comes next. Your work here is so crucial at the nexus between research and practice. And all of you, in some sense, are really the pioneers, sharing a vision of what can be for our field and for the young people in our communities in the future. So I thank you for that and for all that you do for criminal and juvenile justice here in America. Thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Edwards. I'm the president of Evidence-Based Associates. On the advice of my team, I'm going to skip over the 23 side-splitting stories and jokes that I was going to tell you and jump right into our presentations. The Hollywood motion picture industry has the Oscars, television has the Emmys, music has the Grammys, Broadway the Tonys, and Blueprints will be introducing its new award today. I'm happy to introduce the folks that will be presenting the first annual Pioneer in Evidence-Based Violence Prevention Award. And since we're big into acronyms here, I think that's the PEVPP Award. If you have a better suggestion, see the EBA booth on your way out and leave your card. The intent of this award is to recognize the contributions of the visionary leaders in our field and their lasting contributions to the youth and families that we serve. Our first presenter is going to be Scott Hengler.
Well, I understand that Shay is rushing back from the airport, and I'm hoping he'll be coming through that door because we've texted him that he's getting this award, and he says he just has to be present. If he was here, I would thank him for a number of things. I think folks heard this morning how the important role he played in the development of the Blueprints programs. He also was tremendously helpful to us. He invited me up one time in the mid-'90s and essentially asked, what can we do to help you move your model forward? Our response was to support an implementation study to try to figure out the connections between the different components of the implementation process and kid outcomes. And he graciously funded a 8-site study that we conducted. That's really the forerunner for a lot of our implementation work that our center does. I'd like to read a comment that he wrote about a dozen years ago. We know what works. What we need is the commitment and the will to do it. There must be substantial, sustained investment, public and private, in families and communities and the systems that support them. I think he's been a great advocate for many, many years. And for folks who don't know much about OJJDP, early on in my career, the type of research they funded were really cutting-edge work, such as the connection between left-handedness and juvenile crime. All right, so you can see some of the changes that he's made and the progress that he's supported. So on behalf of Jay, I think Clay is going to accept the award. There he is. Let's give him a hand in absentia.
Thank you, Scott. I failed to mention that these awards are the idea and are being presented by the Blueprints Conference Platinum sponsors, Evidence-Based Associates, MST Services, FFT Inc., and Multidimensional Therapeutic Foster Care. So our next presenter is Jim Alexander.
There seems to be a theme here. If Lori were here, I don't know how we do that. Luckily, we do have, and I must admit I was disappointed that Lori could make it, and particularly given the reason that she's not feeling well. But I really enjoyed your presentation, so it's been very nice to meet you and hope to spend more time with you. And I'm going to keep my part very short and hope you will just come up and accept this award for Lori Robinson. You've already heard much about her from Phelan, our presenter, and the guiding force that she did represent before and now represents almost all over again. And it's just extremely valuable to have people with that kind of vision guiding things. As you heard this morning, it takes a lot of people pulling in the same direction to make this stuff work, and it's so exciting to be able to pass this on.
Our final presenter is Jerry Balbin.
Good afternoon. It is a great pleasure for me to present this Pioneer in Evidence-Based Prevention Award to someone who really does not need any introduction in this room. Sharon Mihalik has been involved in the Blueprints project since its inception, first working with founder Del Elliott and more recently as director. She's really the driving force behind these conferences, Blueprints conferences, and we really can't imagine them without her. She works really hard to bring us this conference every 2 years and provide us this opportunity to talk, inspire each other, and learn from each other. We're all very grateful for her many and meaningful contributions, and I'm thrilled to present her with this award.
Thank you very much for this. It's been a real pleasure, actually, and a real honor to work on Blueprints from the beginning. And when I look out at this, I'm really proud to have worked on it. And I guess all of you know that I've worked on any project that's had a level of success, that there's always a lot of people to thank for that. And I can't name all of the people, but I do want to acknowledge that I've worked with some great people over the years. Some are in this audience. And it's just been a pleasure to work with them. I'm really thankful for Dale and the mentoring that he's done for me over the last 20 plus years. And it's really a pleasure to get this award right here in San Antonio. It's my hometown. I've wanted to bring this conference here since we started because I just knew that everybody would love the Riverwalk. And 2 years ago, I got to come back to San Antonio and actually bring one of our promising programs, CASA Start, into San Antonio. And I got to walk into the elementary school and the junior high school that I attended on the south side of San Antonio. So I feel like I'd come full circle at that time, and today I really feel that way. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much for your attention, and we're dismissed to move on to the afternoon breakout sessions. Thank you.